All right. Good morning, everyone. I know that we'll have some more people to trickle in, but I want to be mindful of everyone's time, and let's just go ahead and get started. So I am really excited about today's session. So we know that this May is National Mental Health Awareness Month. And we had so many things that we were, trying to decide, well, what do we want to speak about this particular month? But we know with everything that's going on, that mental health, there is a mental health crisis. And with that being said, there's so much that is associated with PR and mental health and wellness. That being said, we decided to have this conversation. So I'm really excited about everyone being here, and I want to introduce our moderator. I would like my apologies to, well, Paula, if you could just go back to that. I do want to recognize that slide and draw everyone's attention to the PRSA antitrust compliance statement. I won't read it, but I would ask that you just kind of review it very briefly as we comply with federal and state laws. All right. And to our lovely moderator, Nicole A. Thomas. So Nicole is committed to sharing knowledge and expertise with students, small businesses, and global brands. Nicole is a sought-after speaker and thought leader. Her professional background includes marketing and communication with roles with the NBA's Houston Rockets, the Four Seasons, Southwest Airlines, and FedEx. She's also an adjunct professor for the MBA program at Christian Brothers University, where she teaches strategic management, content marketing, business ethics, and corporate social responsibility. Nicole is a true servant leader. She volunteers with the Junior League of Memphis and serves as board chair of Momentum Nonprofit Partners. She previously served as chair of the Corporate Volunteer Council for Volunteer Memphis and was a member of the Global Corporate Leadership Council for United Way of America. Nicole is an active member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. Nicole, I wasn't trying to mess that up intentionally because I'm a Delta. I'm sorry. So welcome.
Well, thank you so much for having me today. I'm excited about this conversation. It's such a crucial part of the public relations profession. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Erica. I won't hold it against you. We're all together when it comes to Greek love. So with that, we'll dive right in. I'm super excited to introduce our panelists to you. We have Dr. Rowena Winkler. She is the founder of Journey to Consciousness, and she's also a woman's authenticity coach and business strategist. She has more than 15 years of PR experience, and we are excited to have her join us. Next up is Carolyn Locke, and Carolyn is the Associate Project Manager with Weber Shandwick. She's also a former national president of Public Relations Society of America, and she's the 2021 recipient of the Florida Public Relations Association Award. So welcome, Carolyn, as well. We also have Peggy Reisler, and Peggy is a strategic communications manager at the University of Tennessee Health Science Center. She's a former news reporter and editor, and she's also a certified yoga instructor. So we're going to have a really well-rounded conversation around mental health, its impact on our industry. So welcome to all of our panelists. And those of you joining us, our chat is open. So if you have any questions, comments, engagement, feel free to include those in the chat. I'll be monitoring those as well so we can add your questions to this robust conversation. So diving right in. According to CareerCast 2019 list of most stressful jobs, public relations executives are listed in the top 10. So as a PR professional, how stressful has your journey been in the industry? And what do you think are some of the factors that attributed to that stress? And I'll open that up to all of our panelists.
Well, I'm happy to jump in. I'm so honored to be on this panel, and thank you for inviting me. I came to PR from a career as a writer and editor at the Commercial Appeal. So many people, as newspapers have contracted, have found themselves in that same position. And it is a stressful transition. I can say that I knew how to write, I knew how to communicate, I knew how to listen, but I didn't have the PR skills, the strategic communication skills, the and the client services skills, because as a reporter, that is not necessarily your focus. And I had to learn that. And that was very stressful. And I think many, many people are in that position. And so that would be the stressor into my journey in PR. I can talk about how I have worked through that, but I thought maybe some of our other panel members would like to discuss their journeys.
Sure, I can also jump in here. So I'm very relatively new to the industry. I've only really been in the industry for about a year now, but I've had some great, throughout my education at the University of Florida, and my involvement with PRSA, I've definitely had kind of a looking glass through kind of the industry as a whole. And I think nowadays, especially with the very recent tragic events in our society, there's that constant content consumption that we as PR professionals have to, kind of do as part of our jobs. And it's like, how do we prioritize our own mental health with doing a job that does require us to interact with the news and staying on top of current events and such. And I know a lot of my peers and colleagues have gone through that kind of mental space for themselves as well. And, I think that's one of the most stressful parts of being in the industry and trying to, take as much as you can handle, but also trying to figure out how you can also do your job well.
Yeah, that's a really great point, Carolyn. Being able to receive all of the information from the news, from society, from our clients, from our teachers and mentors, it's a lot to manage. And for me, what drew me to the PR industry was having that ability, or that opportunity rather, to dabble in different areas. By nature, I can get very, very bored very easily when it comes to work. And I'm always looking for something new and fun and exciting. And I'm an innately curious person. So I'm always trying to find how I can learn, how I can grow as an individual and as a professional. And what drew me to the profession was, whether it's working in an agency setting where I got to interact with different clients, or whether it was teaching at a university level where I have a different group of students every day, or if it's when I was working in an in-house communications team where we had a variety of different case studies and client meetings that we engaged in. So I enjoyed that it was fast-paced by nature, and that I was able to dabble and try different aspects of communication. With that said, when it comes to the stressors, I will fully admit that a lot of it is my own nature, this perfectionism tendencies, wanting to have things done a certain way, and overloading and working myself to burnout. And I know that we're going to speak to this later on in our conversation, so we don't have to get into that right now. But yeah, I think it's what drew me to the industry, but then caused me to shift a little bit, as mentioned in my bio, to the work that I'm doing now.
Yeah. All of you offered some really great points. Peggy talking about that transition into PR, Carolyn talking about the constant content creation, the constant news, and also being mindful of prioritizing our mental health. And then Dr. Winkler, you really hit it on the head. And I'm sure many of our PR professionals in the audience can attest to that information overload, perfectionism, and then that overloading of work. There's this constant, we're always on in the PR space. And if we're not on for ourselves, we're on for our clients. We're also on for our media partners and collaborators that we work with. But just moving into our next question. So despite this working in such a stressful industry and environment and those expectations, how do you manage your mental health and your wellness?
I can jump in here first too. I think something that I encourage everyone to do, especially with our incoming students or new professionals, is definitely setting those boundaries for yourself. And I know, I think ever since the pandemic happened and a lot of us have started working remotely, we feel this very big sense of urgency to like always be on, like you said, Nicole. And I think being able to kind of set boundaries for yourself of, not looking at messages after a certain time, not sending emails after a certain time, because that does set precedent for your company to feel like, even if you don't expect someone to respond to you at like 9 p.m., even just seeing that email notification can put that kind of a little bit of stress on your colleagues and even on yourself. So that's why I always try to do like those scheduling emails. Like if I'm working at like 11 p.m., I'll schedule it for like 8 the next morning, because I know no one's going to be looking at this, and it definitely will set a better precedent for your company as a whole, I would say. And I think also just reminding myself that I come first. My work is important, but if I am not at my best, I cannot perform at my best. So being able to also schedule time to do things for myself. So I go to dance classes every week. I like read for pleasure. I go make time for my friends and my family, and just being able to remove yourself from the work environment mentally and also physically is, I think, super important, and kind of how I kind of go about managing my own wellness.
I would echo what Carolyn said about fitness and exercise. For me, that it has been a lifeline, and it's been a lifelong passion for me. It is so fascinating that I can leave the office at say 5:30 or so after a really stressful day, driving to the gym, and in my head, I'm saying, I'm too tired. I can't do this. I want to go home. I want to sit on the couch. I know we all have those thoughts, but when I walk through the door, when I am there, it is totally a different atmosphere. I feel, and everything from the day just kind of leaves. And I think that is the main benefit of a set fitness program in your life.
Yeah, and I think especially with the pandemic, with COVID-19, giving ourselves the grace and space and remembering that it's been a tough couple of years, and that not a lot of us had the luxury or the ability for safety and, being healthy to leave and be able to disconnect. So per Carolyn and Peggy's point, right, the boundaries got blurred a little bit when it came to working from home in a pandemic. And so, as I mentioned, as a perfectionist and also as a Pisces, boundaries are a little difficult for me. But as a coach, Tracy O'Malley, says, boundaries are a loving act. So whether that's setting boundaries with your coworkers and your clients in order for you to show up as your best self, or we mentioned emails. I know something that my therapist helped me with, speaking of mental health, is turning off email notifications on my phone, so that I literally have to come into my office and be at my laptop to answer emails, because it was getting to the point where I felt this urgency to have to answer when that's not necessarily the case. So just reminding ourselves that with working from home and the pandemic and all of the changes that we've been through in the past couple of years, to give ourselves some grace in that. So I appreciate the comments my colleagues have been saying so far.
Yeah, you all touched on some really great points around boundaries. Carolyn, I am with you on email scheduling. I set everything to go out. I know I work later in the evening. That's more of my creative time. So I set things, delayed delivery for 8 a.m., 8:30. I give other people some space to get into the office. Also unplugging. I have unplug days I don't check emails on Sundays. If you send it on Sunday, you might want to send it again on Monday or Tuesday. But I don't check emails on Sundays because I don't want to encroach on that family time. And we have to set those boundaries for ourselves and prioritize ourselves, because we can't pour from an empty cup, and we can't be our best selves if we don't prioritize ourselves. And Peggy, you hit it right on the head when it comes to fitness and exercise. How do we channel this stressful energy channel this stress into a positive energy, or a goal energy, or just channeling it into something else versus absorbing the stress and letting it become a part of our physical bodies? And Dr. Winkler, grace and space. Yes, many of us on the panel, many of us who are in the audience who work in healthcare specifically, the pandemic was go time. I know colleagues who were working 14-hour days. The news was constantly changing, information output. We were not resting. I think in some industries, they were able to like take that break. But in the world of communications and PR and marketing, that did not happen for us. So it's really important for us to set those boundaries. Another thing, love the idea around email notifications. I actually have all notifications on my cell phone turned off, whether it's Facebook, Group Me, Group Text. There's only one thing that comes, text. That's the only thing that'll come through. And then I also don't have the ringer on. So if I see it, I see it when I see it. So giving ourselves that space and grace is so important. I know I talked a little bit about the demands of our job during the pandemic, but I also want to ask you all, have the demands of your job changed since the pandemic? And if so, how? Let's start with Dr. Winkler on this one. Yeah.
I was about to say, I became a business owner during the pandemic.
Okay.
So, I worked in the industry, as mentioned in my bio, and the pandemic, along with the birth of my beautiful baby girl, who was literally born days before lockdown, March 8th, 2020.
Oh, wow.
These
Okay.
pivotal moments, game-changing moments where I reflected on my life, my legacy, and my mental health and wellness. And for me, it was, you never know what's going to happen. Like, here we are in this pandemic, and I wanted to role model for my baby girl something that I've wanted to do for a long time, which was to be an entrepreneur. And what has been so wonderful is I've been able to take my experiences as a PR and communications professional and my experiences as a professor, a teacher, and a mentor, and create this coaching offering where I help women, clients, find their voice, whether that is through marketing and whether that is through speaking or finding identity and doing more of those mindset work, doing that grace and space I mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And it's shifted the trajectory of my career in a way that I would have never anticipated, and perhaps may have not tried if it weren't for the pandemic. So totally a huge shift for me and what I'm up to.
Yeah, that shift is happening for a lot of people. I see you, Peggy, I see you. Are you preparing to say something?
Well, I would, yes, I'd be glad to. Thank you. At the start of the pandemic, we were in the office on a Wednesday, and then our boss said, tomorrow we're all working from home. We had to grab all our stuff and just take it with us and set up at home. And, that was an adjustment. At the same time, as the media representative for UTHSC, we were just deluged with calls from reporters to talk to our experts, and we're thrilled and honored to help the community in that way. It was a very busy time. We are now hybrid. I am one of those people who love being in the office. I love being around people. I love being on our campus. And it has been an adjustment to understand that some people are not like that, and some people still want to be at home. And it has just been an adjustment. we're no less busy. It's just now you have to figure some people are here, some people are here. How do you connect with people? And I have really missed a lot of the personal connection with being in an office.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I think my experience is a little different just because I've only really been in the industry through the pandemic. So it's like, how do I, like, being able to onboard myself into a new job for like fully remote. It was definitely a challenge, and it wasn't what I thought my first big girl job was going to be. And so being able to figure out how to communicate and build those connections with my colleagues and my clients was definitely a challenge, but it was a very good learning curve, and being able to know how to, again, set those boundaries, like I said, and, not feel guilty for if you're not feeling well. I feel like some of my friends also who are working in agencies, when they're sick, they feel like because they're working remote, they need to push through that because they're remote, they're not physically going to the office, and you want to push through your work. And I think that's something I don't recommend for anyone to do. If you need to take a day to yourself, you shouldn't feel like you need to push through that just to get your job done. There will definitely be other people on your team to help support you. And of course, if you feel like your job doesn't offer you that support, it's not a place where you want to be. And I think being able to log off again physically, like we've been talking about, just because we always have our devices with us is super important, and something that I hope to kind of maintain throughout growing my career in the future.
Great and solid points. I mean, each of you talked about things when it comes to priority. I know we call it COVID clarity. During the pandemic, a lot of people really took a step back, took stock of their lives, reprioritized, whether it was family or small business or legacy. What do we really want to do with our lives? So there's that component that came into it that influenced our work during the pandemic. And then Peggy, you also brought some really cool things to the table too. We're in a different work environment, and learning that other people have different work styles. I'm a closeted introvert, believe it or not. I felt like I thrived during the pandemic, but there were also those times where I was working 14 hours a day and it was blurred. Work and life were a little bit blurred. But different people need different things. In order to be creative, I need that quiet. I need that space. So an office environment doesn't always facilitate that for me, but I'm also conscious of what my extroverted colleagues may need. And then Carolyn, you talked about something really great about feeling guilty about when you're not feeling well. And there's a question we'll cover about that. But there are different types of rest, right? There's mental rest, there's physical rest, there some just sleep rest. So there are different types of rest. And I think sometimes we need to take into consideration what type of rest we need. And actually, I'll go ahead and just skip to that question. I'll circle back to some others. But the Public Relations and Communications Association and OPM released a report that like 72% of PR professionals who took time off for their mental health were honest with their employers about taking that leave. And then compared to like the previous year, where it was only 40%, how can we shape the industry where people are more comfortable about talking about their mental health and then also taking that time, even if it's for your personal life? So how can we shape that conversation about it's okay to take a break?
Well, I come from a newsroom where you never take a break. I don't care if it's snowing. I don't care what's happening. You're in the middle of whatever it is, and it doesn't matter. You have to be there. So this is something that I'm probably I would own that I struggle with. I think it is a great question, and it's important for us to consider. I'm interested to hear what the other panelists have to say about it.
Yeah, I think one thing that I love about working at Weber is that we hold these times to connect with our leadership team. It's basically open forums for all of our employees to kind of chat about, recent current events. It's really just a safe space to talk about, discussing violence or racism. Or just yesterday, we just talked about the shooting, a very tragic event that happened in Texas, and just hearing all of my colleagues, a lot of them are parents, and they were being very vulnerable and very honest about their feelings and how, it was really tough for them to be at work and while their kids are they're sending off their kids to school, and they really want to keep them at home. And it was just so eye-opening, and just being able to kind of, you know, hold that space for your employees, and I think just makes it so much more comfortable at work, and you just feel a lot closer to your colleagues, and knowing that, we're all kind of going through the same thing. It's very inspiring and kind of just very encouraging to kind of have that community. So just being able to just hold that space and be extremely vulnerable to your comfortability level is, I think, super important. And I feel very, comfortable talking about and being able, very honest with my work, and even with my own personal life. I'm telling you, if I don't feel well, I don't really want to go out tonight. So yeah.
Yeah, my response actually ties to Carolyn's response, which is it's I think it will come through stemming from the culture of the organization, right? So it sounds like, Carolyn, that Weber Shandwick has a great culture at the agency where they provide opportunities for the employees to come together and speak openly about mental health related issues and these tough things that are happening around us right now. And the fact that it's with leadership included, right? Because it has to be at all levels. It can't just be folks, at the ground level or, at a lower level, right? Having these conversations. There has to be role modeling and accountability from executive top leadership as well. I know in my personal experience, I've worked at organizations where, especially as a woman of color, I have felt that my mental health was taking a hit, or that that there were microaggressions or things happening that impacted my mental health in a way where I didn't feel comfortable and safe to speak my truth and to share what was going on. And what ended up happening was I was taking baggage from previous work experiences into my last job before I left my 9 to 5 to build my business. And it was a completely different experience where I had an amazing boss who was open to talk about these things and was like, yeah, take the rest of the day off if you're not, like we had a very open, transparent conversation. But it was after dealing with the opposite for years and having to navigate that was interesting for me as a professional, and knowing that, yeah, it comes from the leadership and it comes from company culture. So I'm glad to hear that at your first job, despite it being, remote pandemic times, that you're having those opportunities, Carolyn. And Peggy, I hope that, that we can find a way to find more balance together.
Yeah. Yeah. So just to reiterate, you're right, around the culture of an organization. How does leadership model the way of how we take care of ourselves? Do we feel as though we have permission to take care of ourselves? And if we don't, then to set those boundaries. It's also important. I remember Carolyn saying creating community where we can discuss mental health, when we can discuss the challenges and the societal events that are taking place and impacting us. Because oftentimes environments, our work environments can feel like, well, what happened in society is over there, but we still need you to focus on work. We bring our full selves to work as human beings. So it's important to lead with empathy, to request that empathy from your leadership, as well as creating those spaces to be vulnerable. So these are all some really great topics and some things that you've brought to the table. I'm going to visit the chat really quick before we go into our next question. Yes, Constance, introverts did thrive during the pandemic. And it is a challenge now when it comes to going back into the office. I had to go and drive downtown to the office 5 days in a row. And y'all, my energy level, I was like, I'm not leaving my house for the next 2 weeks. It was a lot. It was the most. And then yes, Peggy, also someone else, Destiny, she also worked at a news desk for 3 years. So she understands always having to be on the go in that mindset. And then Dr. Winkler also added, it's amazing how much solid leadership makes a difference. And it's wild that it isn't something that spans across all organizations. We have the opportunity, particularly as PR professionals, communicators, and influencers within our organizations, to change that. So we have the opportunity to influence. So I'm going to go into our next piece. Peggy, I know that you are a yoga instructor, and you also work full-time in communications. And Dr. Winkler, you also serve as a life coach. So did the job stress lead to your decision to choose different industries or these other paths?
Not for me, no. I came to fitness and eventually yoga and Pilates from ballet. Ballet classes as a little girl. So many of us have done that. Thank you to my mother, who took me every Tuesday and Thursday after school, whether I liked it or not. And many times I didn't. But it gave me this baseline of appreciation for movement and what it could bring to me, an appreciation for music and moving to music. That has helped me. I'm in a church choir. It has helped me with that also. And little by little, through college, I was in a dance group. And then after college, would take exercise classes, and then found aerobics, loved it, and all different kinds of step and cycle and all of that. And then as many of us who have our I guess high self-esteem, I said I could do that. And so I started learning how to be an instructor of group fitness, and then found yoga and Pilates and loved them. And so, it is the reason I am sane is because of them, but the job didn't drive me there.
Yeah. No, thank you for that insight. Dr. Winkler?
So Nicole, you mentioned this COVID clarity piece. I call it that COVID was the collective retreat, where essentially we all were home and had to sit with ourselves. And for us extroverts out here, it was challenging to not be able to go out and do all the things, but it did really bring that clarity and something that I realized and discovered about myself through the Clubhouse app. I don't know if any folks hopped on Clubhouse during the pandemic, because that was a way for me to connect with folks, is that I am a true multi-hyphenate, right? That I am a PR and communications marketing professional. I am a teacher. I am a musical theater performer, Peggy. So when you mentioned ballet and dance, that got me very excited. I am a mom. I'm all of these things. And what better way than to add entrepreneur and business owner and bring all of these gifts and talents that I can use and utilize to help other people on their journeys. So it wasn't so much the stress, it was that COVID clarity that allowed me, how can I, as we mentioned, right, how can I take this energy, take this propensity to want to change and help and support people in a way that is meaningful, which is what, again, drew me to PR as well. And just kind of, reframe it a bit. So I think it's similar work, but just in a like a different lens, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's being able to use those skills in a multitude of ways. Several of us are multi-hyphenates, whether it's the comms piece and the marketing piece, the instructor and the teaching piece. I love the appreciation for music and movement. So I'm starting my fitness journey. Most people don't know that I've been a licensed massage therapist and esthetician for the past 20 years. So, but I really like receiving massages. So that was part of my stress relief during the pandemic, receiving massages, and then also finding those other ways to challenge my energy, whether it was through photography or road trips. I took more road trips during the pandemic. Just I wasn't ready to get on a plane, but I still wanted to foster and feed that love of travel. I know that Carolyn put in the chat that there are many PR professionals who've been in musical theater. So there are some fellow thespians there. So there's this creative piece that also helps us to reduce that stress. So I encourage those of you who have that creative element, go feed that energy. And then Terry Del Rosa, she says she doesn't have she doesn't have a talent, but she's always down for karaoke. So yes to karaoke too, Terry. So Carolyn, let's focus on, you're relatively new to the industry, and you talked a little bit about what it was like to onboard yourself in a virtual space. What advice would you give to new PR professionals who often have to juggle those many hats? What systems do you have in place or tactics that you use to manage your busy schedule?
Sure. I think, I think a lot of PR professionals can also agree that a lot of us are very type A. And so everything's just neatly. I have I don't know if anyone knows Notion, but I use that to kind of keep track of everything. It's literally my saving grace. If you want a Notion tutorial, please hit me up. But there's tons of different tutorials out there on YouTube. But it's a really great kind of project management tool that I use for my personal workspace and also just personal life, just keeping everything just going on and stuff. And so, I'm always on that sticky note to-do list kind of track too. That's also kind of helps keep me grounded because I'm a very visual learner. I like to see what the things I have to do. And so that kind of helps ground myself. But I think another thing that I also want to remind new PR professionals that we have so many years to kind of build our career. And I know talking to my peers, there's a lot of comparison between where we were because, when I was an undergrad, people were getting these amazing internships. They were getting these kick-ass jobs. And some of us were I haven't even started applying. I'm still going through the interview process. And I think that really is a thief of joy. And I think, just because someone at our age is seemingly ahead of you, it doesn't mean that you're behind because everyone is on a different timeline. So, trust that things will work out. And I think leaning on a mentor, finding a mentor in the industry, whether it be, someone close to your age, I really value those diverse mentors, someone close to your age and maybe someone very more seasoned in the industry can kind of help keep you a little bit grounded and kind of remind yourself that, you're on your way there. You don't have to feel rushed. Time again will work out. And also remind yourself, we're like I said, we're type A, we're perfectionists, like Dr. Winkler said. I just remind yourself that, everything doesn't have to be perfect. I think as a young professional, we kind of do have that pass to make mistakes and to learn and grow from them. So everything's a new learning opportunity. So I'm very excited to be a young professional in this industry. And I think everyone in my generation is super smart, and I'm super excited to kind of eventually lead the industry with my fellow peers and also learn from all of you seasoned professionals as well. And so, yeah.
Even though you're a young professional, you are wise beyond your years. You hit on some really great points. Thank you for Notion. I may take you up on that tutorial. I currently use a little bit of OneNote, but it's so important to have project management tools. I live and die by the calendar. If it's not on my calendar, it's not happening and I'm not coming. So I let people know that if you didn't send a calendar invite, I won't be there. But it's so important. You do have time to build your career and also to not compare yourself to other people. Those are just really great points. Trust your journey and then learn from every opportunity. It's so important to have a growth mindset and give yourself some grace when things don't necessarily go as expected. I don't always look for ways to learn from the challenges. I don't like to use the word failures, but hey, sometimes we have them. Learn from those opportunities and don't make those mistakes again. How can we be better? I think the best thing is always, can I be a better person today than I was yesterday? And that just is what keeps us moving forward. Would anyone else like to add to that? Yes.
I think those are great points. As one of the seasoned professionals that you speak about, two things my advice would be to find what gives you joy in your profession and love it and do it as much as you can. For me, I love media relations. I love the PR aspect of it. I love client service. If I can sit down in front of a computer and write, that is my happy place. And I am always, it's just my passion. And so, that is, I would advise that if you love digital, work, whatever you love, let that be the thing that you gravitate toward. And then the other suggestion would be, as you all have talked about, and this would apply to not just the new PR practitioner, but to all of us seasoned practitioners along the way. Continue to learn, continue to have that passion to grow in your career or in whatever you're interested in. I'm in the process of getting my doctorate in leadership and instructional practice. And I hate myself most nights when I go home after work and have to do that work some more. But it is fascinating. And I just would encourage anybody to do that. So 2 points.
Great insights, Peggy. Thank you for sharing that. Congratulations to you and much encouragement and support on your doctoral journey. It's not easy. It is an undertaking. So yes, I understand. Before we close out, I'd like to hear any final thoughts from our panelists before we open it up to our team members, to our guests and audience members, so that they can ask questions themselves. What are some of your closing thoughts when it comes to how we as PR professionals can continue to influence the perception when it comes to mental health and setting those boundaries? How can we influence that?
I think something direct that we can do to kind of, again, reduce that stigma around mental health in our industry, in our society, and kind of just shift conversations around this topic is, especially with our kind of moving us into this hybrid space or remote space, whatever works for you all, is, definitely giving, again, our colleagues and ourselves grace, proactively reaching out to our colleagues to check in on their mental health. I think being able to show to your colleagues that, you are someone that they can lean to or be honest with about, their work. I know it's not, especially like right now, it's just not a very, it's a tough time to be a PR professional, and I don't see it really going away anytime soon, unfortunately. But I think being able, again, to hold that space of community, to show that there is people that you can lean on in the industry, and using our skills as a communicator. We have so much, we are the experts. So being able to, use our platforms and, speak out and speak up for the things that we are very passionate about, I think can definitely hold a lot of power when we come together as professionals, and we can put a lot of pressure on the people that we need to hold accountable. So
yeah, no, great advice. Thank you for that. We get to influence some of the leaders of some of the largest organizations in our community. So creating that safe space and being proactive is really key. Dr. Winkler.
So you mentioned it, Nicole, and to piggyback off of Carolyn's point, as PR professionals, communicators, we have the ability to influence. And so being mindful and intentional and taking, day-to-day opportunities, whether that is in your interactions with your colleagues, with your clients, with your leadership, even in your own home, right? To not be afraid to have these conversations about mental health and about, the need to take breaks and to have boundaries and to being open and honest and transparent in that, and just being intentional with our vulnerability, right? Because it is through sharing our stories and sharing what we've been through in these experiences during this time, as I mentioned, that's been very difficult and challenging for a lot of us, especially those of us who've been working around the clock during COVID-19, to feel empowered in order to role model, empower others to do the same, because we do have that influence. And then the other piece that I'll say is a quote, we mentioned theater. This is a quote that I've taken from Ben Platt, who won the Tony for Dear Evan Hansen. And I tweaked it just a bit. It's what makes you different makes you powerful. So if you're feeling that, I shouldn't feel this way, or I'm comparing myself to someone else, or, why can't I get this right? Why am I failing or challenged in this way? It's through these experiences of us being different and us showing up as our uniquely empowered, authentic selves, people are going to feel that energy and sense that, and it's going to empower others to want to show up as we all are. So I hope that's helpful for today.
I'm so encouraged by listening to some of our younger PR professional colleagues in terms of your attention to boundary setting and personal health. I know there are many of us in the PR profession who come from a time when vulnerability was not a thing with women in business. And, I'm not that old, but I would say, that it just was not a thing. We had our babies, and then we went right back to work. And, and maybe that was only about happened in newsrooms, but I don't think so. So I'm very encouraged by the next generation of PR professionals. And I know that I will learn from you all. I hope you can learn some things from me too.
Yes, I love that quote, Dr. Winkler. What makes you different makes you powerful. And I think we all as PR professionals can walk in our power. There's some great takeaways from today around self-prioritization, self-care, channeling your energy, setting boundaries, turning those notifications off. Don't send your emails, delayed distribution. There are a lot of things that we can do to influence and shape the space around mental health, not only for PR professionals, but also throughout the organizations and clients that we work with. I want to thank each of our panelists for the discussion today. I'd love to open it up. If you have a question and if you're an introvert, feel free to put your question in the chat and I will moderate that part. If you are an extrovert, feel free to unmute yourself and state your question. Go for how you feel today. And we have about 10 minutes or so we can take some additional questions. So what questions do you have? Okay. Well, I've asked all of mine. So
I feel like I have one. Hi, everybody. I know I have something. I'm in my office working now. So in between my client meetings for today. I guess at what point, I guess this would be a question for everybody. At what point did you realize that you needed to start implementing these type of I guess boundaries and things into your work life? When did you see because like for me, switching over to PR, I immediately felt like, okay, some things are changing. So when did you know that you needed to start setting boundaries and moving around and things like that?
Great question. Which one of our panelists would like to kick off the answer?
Yeah, don't end up like me. I got stressed to the point of getting kidney stones. So it manifested physically. And that's when I started my own journey and practice of yoga, meditation, and setting boundaries. So it got to the point where my body had to let me know, no. And even just this, I have a kiddo in daycare now, right? So there's germs coming through this house on the regular. And, just getting sick all the time has just really taught me to, okay, well, what am I going to do? I have to rest and I have to recover. So hopefully that doesn't happen to you, Destiny, or to anyone here. Wouldn't want kidney stones for anyone, but that's what happened for me.
I think the conversation around COVID clarity, I think getting into in the industry during COVID, it really allowed me to reflect on what I am looking for in my career and my job. And I think a lot of people also went through the same thing. I think that's why we're having this, this great resignation and I think a lot of people are realizing, this isn't what I want out of my career. And I think I want to prioritize myself and go after the things that, I do want and look, and there are companies that I think will listen to you and, provide you with the things that you may need. And so I think just unfortunately, of course, the pandemic was a really stressful time, but it really did allow us to reprioritize what we are actually wanting out of our careers and such. And so I think continuing to keep that as a best practice every day and kind of keeping into your long-term goals as a professional, I think is super important too.
Well, for me, both of you have made some really great points. Stress does manifest itself physically. I ate my way during the pandemic. We're not going to talk about this pandemic 30 that I'm trying to lose, but stress does manifest itself physically. And we have to be mindful of that. I recognize that around December 2020, because I hadn't stopped, like literally the first weekend of the pandemic, I was in New Orleans speaking at the American Marketing Association conference, and it literally just did not stop. I was still working virtually at that point, but in the world of DEI, the incidents of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and tons of societal things, racial things that were taking place. Around December of 2020, I hit a wall. Like it was just a mental wall of, I need a mental break. I need to decompress from how things are currently going. And it also made me rethink and reshape my business model. One-to-one clients, it took a lot of time, energy, and effort. So it's like, well, how do I want to reshape my business model? So I would say there were just some indicators, the triggers that tell you something has to change. I need to make a change. And you'll know them. They're all individual to us, but you'll know them when you experience them. Great question.
Thanks, everybody.
You're welcome. What other questions are out there? We're all teachers, so I can't call on you, but we're all instructors.
I guess I'll just jump in. I guess I wonder, like, how do we stop this from happening again? Like that snowball effect that I feel like a lot of us were at the tipping point when COVID started. And I just wondered, like, how do we not forget this in like 2 years?
I think it's just to constantly be an advocate about these conversations. I think being able to keep your leadership team accountable and listen to what the employees need, being able to implement that into our businesses and to our leadership. And I think just again, constantly holding these conversations. Just don't stop talking about it. Just over talk, like over communicate your needs and such. And I think now that we have started this kind of effect, I think it'll eventually become an avalanche, and it won't stop. And I think again, just like using your platforms and constantly just calling things out, or the things that we need, I think is just going to be, I think that's one way to kind of keep that conversation going. And I know I won't stop talking about it. And I think having these conversations even now is just super important, to kind of just like bring awareness to these topics.
Sheila, I along with that, I also think about cultivating our relationships. Even though some of it might still be virtual, cultivating the relationships in our community of PR professionals, in our just in general, in our relationships that bring us joy, that feed our souls. For me, I'm going to go back to the gym again. In our group fitness classes, if somebody's not there for a few days, it's like, oh, where have you been? Or, how's your mother? Your mother's, just those kinds of relationships make such a difference in our lives and to our mental health. And I think, that's important too.
All great and solid points. We have to remember the lessons that this particular moment in time has taught us, and using those lessons every day. I really love the constantly be an advocate for yourself, also be an advocate for our profession, because something I learned during the pandemic was that our clients and our leadership they think what we do is magic and that it's easy. We make it look easy. We make their experience feel easy, but a 1-hour press conference was really 3 months worth of work. The press release, the digital assets, the video creation, the coordination between our social media channels. So advocating for ourselves also requires us to coach and educate our clients and our leadership team about the nature of our work and how we do what we do and how taxing and time consuming it can be. This has been an amazing discussion. I hope that each of you learned something from it. Getting to easy can be difficult some days. Yes, Dan, very much so. I hope that this conversation will help you in your journey as a PR professional to remind you to take care of yourself, to set those boundaries. Thank you so much for this robust conversation. I'm going to turn it back over to Erica Williams so that she can close us out with some of our PRSA topics and announcements.
All right. This was such a great conversation. So I just want to thank all of you for participating in this. And yes, part 2 is definitely needed because there was just so much rich conversation. And I know a lot of people in the comments were saying, changing my phone settings now. As my camera was off, I was over here changing phone settings, figuring out how to utilize Do Not Disturb even more. Paula, if we can just put up the information, and we are, okay. So of course we have to mention that if you're interested in getting accredited APR, then you can learn more about that through PRSA. We have team members who are designated for that. And you can go to the next one. All right. And of course, about us, if you are not a member of PRSA Memphis, then please become one. We are doing a lot of amazing things, and we're having a lot of great discussions with people like the ones that you heard from today. So if you need more information about joining, the next slide will let you know. All right. So if you need more information, then you can email Jonathan Watkins. If you If you see, his information is at the bottom of the screen. It's membership@PRSAMemphis.org. Again, thank you so much for this rich conversation. If anyone has any questions for me or any other team members or any of the panelists, feel free. I was going to say the panelists will stick around, but I can't do that with their time. I'll stick around if anyone has any questions for me. And if you have questions for the panelists, you can send them to me and I will get them to them. All right. Thank you. And everyone enjoy the rest of your workday. Thank you all. Great conversation.
You are so welcome. Paula, do you want to stop recording it?